Here we have the Momo rig, which is a cool rig. I believe it's totally free as well. Here's the website. Let me give you the link. It is a really cute rig. I've seen some really cool animations. It's got this cool 2D style to it. It's a very simple rig, which is it's really nice. I've played around a little bit. I was going to do a quick animation with it, but I never got the chance. But it's just really cute. And I also love the face because you'll have these facial controls down here. And you can actually just change the eyes right here. So you don't actually animate geometry. It's kind of visual like that, which is really cute. And then the mouth as well is really cute. So I would recommend people check this out. It's a fun little rig. But the question that I had regarding this rig is this rig only has IK arms. It does not have FK arms. So you can only animate it with this. Now, like I said at the beginning of the stream, is that a problem? No. Like, ideally for me, I like to use FK, especially if the arms are just kind of free and gesturing. I feel like I can get more subtleties in the animation a lot of the time. It gets more natural overlap. That's just the way I animate. I know a bunch of people who only ever use IK, so in this case, it would be perfect for them. But let's say, for sake of argument, we have this rig and we want FK. Well, the first thing I would suggest is try getting used to IK. It's harder at times, but usually it's going to be simpler to just get used to IK and focus on your posing than it is to modify a rig. Because you never know what issues you might have when you start modifying a rig, where things can start going wrong. And we'll probably see that here as we modify things. We'll probably have to undo a lot to get things working just right. So first step, try to just get used to it. It's good practice. It boosts your skill set and you learn something new. And if ever you get another rig that only has IK, you know what you have to do. Like, you can do it. It's not what you prefer, but it gives you another skill set. But let's say, for sake of argument, we need FK for this. We just need it. It has to be in here. How do we get that to work? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do is understand how a rig actually works in terms of IK setup and an FK setup. If we don't know that, we won't really know how to dive into this properly. So, a rig is basically a piece of geometry that is bound to a skeleton, to joints. A skeleton on a rig is essentially just a series of joints that are connected together. So here I'm going to create some joints. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. There we go. That is a series of joints. Now, an FK setup is essentially a series of joints that have a NURBS control. So if I create a NURBS primitive circle and paste it or put it right here, like that, we have a basic rig. I would just need to connect this joint to this circle, which I can do with a constraint, for example. There's many ways of doing it. So let's do a constrain parent. Now, aha, I've got a rig. Whee, look at it, it's waving. That's pretty much an FK system. You see, if I move to the next joint, the next one follows, and then if we had a hand, this one would move that. That's an FK system. It's not really complex. You just have a geometry bound to the skeleton. Now, there's lots of ways of connecting joints. This is like the super basic version. But what's an IK setup? An IK setup is the same joint system, but with an extra piece attached to it. Essentially, I will take my shoulder joint and my elbow joint in this case, and I'm going to go to skeleton. I haven't done this in a while. And I'm going to create an IK handle. So that joint to this one. And what that does is connects, and let's see, did I do it backwards. I think I might have done it backwards. Okay, let's see. Go back to skeleton. Create IK. Oh wait, I think it's IK spline. Yeah, that's why. So there, skeleton. No. Ooh, they updated things. I like it. IK handle. Interesting. For some reason, it doesn't want to work the way it should normally. So what it should do is just add an IK handle there. I'm probably forgetting a step. Like I said, I haven't used the IK tool in Maya since probably Maya 2011. So I'm probably thinking of a simpler IK chain. Let's see. Skeleton. That I'm just missing a whole step. Let's see. What am I forgetting? Forgetting something. Yeah, it is a long time. I haven't touched this rigging stuff in a long time, which is something I do feel I need to get back into, because rigging it's fun. It's cool. What am I missing? It should just be create IK handle. There's something simple that I'm overlooking. Wrist and shoulder? That could be. Wrist and shoulder? No, that didn't do it. Oh, wait, there you go. Aha. So I was just doing it backwards. Duh. See, this is the thing with Maya. If something doesn't work, try doing it backwards. Then it should work. So the same with parenting and constraining. So now that it was something stupid simple. So I just went backwards and there we go. Now we have, and it was working a second ago. Oh, wait, I know what it is. I need to select the IK handle. Where are you? There we go. So with the IK handle selected, we now have our little arm. So, ta-da! And there we go. That's why. So the IK handle essentially just creates you can see this little line that connects the first joint to the last. And if we select that, this will move the arm and create this connection, this IK arm. That's pretty much it. And we've got that right there. We have our offsets and rolls and twists that allow us to move where the elbow is. And here's our pull vector right there. So with these pull vector attributes, this is where the actual pull vector on a rig gets attached to. We can basically create an IK arm. That's the basics of it. So FK arm, just a regular joint chain with controls that connect it. IK arm is a series of joints that are connected with this IK handle. Voila. Okay, so that's the basics of it. Now, on this rig, the first thing we want to do is check out the joints. So let's go into wireframe mode, and you can see that we can't actually see the joints on this rig by default. What we can see though is the IK handle right here. You can see I select that. There's our IK handle. And when I do select it, it shows the joints that are attached to it. And there's our IK handle, which is currently being controlled by this control right here. It's moving that IK handle. So we have this control, which is moving our IK handle. We also need to see our joints. Now, one thing I'm going to do just to simplify this is I'm just going to hide all the other controls on this rig that we're not going to be using. So we're not going to be using any of the head controls, so we can hide all that. We do want the clavicle controls. Don't need the neck. Technically don't need the PD, but I'm just going to move it out of the way. Don't need any of the controls on this side. Don't need the finger controls. Now, the reason I'm hiding this is just so we can see things a little bit more clearly. Yeah, and these I'm not going to be able to hide. The normal way. So I'm just going to select these. And if you want to hide something that is connected in a hierarchy. So for example, I want to hide this spine control. But if I hit Control H to hide something or add it to a display layer right there and turn off the display layer visibility, see how it hides the other controls below it? I don't want that. I still want to see that the rest of the arm controls. What I can do is select this, open up the attribute editor, and then under object display, I can turn off the visibility right here under the shape node. This will turn off the visibility of the shape itself, but not of the full object. So I can just go here, boop, 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 boop. There we go. So now let's actually do this one as well. This is just going to simplify our view so we just have the controls we need to look at the time. Okay, so first thing first, we need to be able to see our IK handles. Turn that on in the show menu. Make sure joints are visible. Okay, but we're not seeing the joints. Let's find them. So we're going to dive into our outliner and look at that. We've got a skeleton right there. And right there, these are the joints. You can see them by that icon right here. But they are not visible. Why? Well, one, there's just a display layer right here. Skeleton. Turn that on. Ta-da! Joints are back. Yay! Very nice and easy. So we've got the joints visible. You'll notice that there is a spare joint kind of in the middle here. This is the forearm twist to do this motion in the arm. That's fine. The most important joints we're going to be looking at are the wrist and the shoulder and the elbow. So those three joints. The clavicle will also play a part in this. You can see the clavicle control. That's what's giving us that nice twisting motion right here. Okay. So how do we get this from an IK setup into an FK setup? There's going to be a lot of digging here. The first thing we need to do is turn off the IK setup. You'll notice that if I take this joint, for example, and try to rotate it, nothing's happening. This is because the IK is superseding everything. It's going, no, we're in IK mode, we're staying in IK mode. So what you need to do is select the IK handle. It should be right in the middle of the wrist here. You can see I've got it selected right there. And you have the IK blend attribute. This is the IK on off. This is why when you see it on a rig, it's called FK-IK blend, not FK-IK on off, because the thing that turns it on and off is the blend attribute. So if I take this and turn it off, boop. Now I can take my joints. Look at that. We've got an FK setup. There we go. The IK does nothing anymore. If we want to turn it back on, select that, IK blend on off. Now, if you want to get really fancy with this, you could add a control. I'm just going to add another circle. This is like extra. But let's say I want to add a on-off switch to that hand. I'm going to take this control and I'm just going to constrain it to the wrist joint right here. So wrist joint. Actually, let's parent it just for the sake of it. I'm just going to parent it to that wrist joint and we're going to call this extra controls. So it's going to follow along with that wrist wherever it goes. And did I not parent it? No, I did not. child, then parent key. Okay, there we go. So that's parented. Let's call that extra controls. I'm going to hide and lock all of the translates and rotates because we don't need to see them. We're not going to be moving this around. So right click on those, lock and hide selected. Now it's just there and it follows along. I'm going to create a new attribute for it. So I'm going to go to modify. Modify? Yeah. Add attribute. Let's call this FKIK blend. I can spell blend. And this is going to be a Boolean. Boolean is on off. There's all sorts of different data types here. If you're interested in learning more about these, you can kind of just take a look at them. Just do a quick Google search. You'll get some information on them. Boolean is on off. So we're going to add that. And let's not add a hyphen there. So FKIK on off. There we go. FKIK blend. So right now it's set to off. And luckily, so is our IK blend right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the, let's see, under Windows Animation Editors. No, I think they put it under animation here. I want the blend key or set driven key. There we go. So I'm going to go to animation, key, set driven key. And set driven key basically creates a connection between different keys. And you can set basically like if this attribute equals this, these other attributes equal this. And I can set a driver and driven here. And actually now that I say that, I can simplify this even more. So this is very cool for like creating visibility on off, where if I turn the visibility on, it'll turn on the visibility on all of these different things and repose something in certain ways. Very, very nice. But honestly, I could simplify this more by just using a connection. So I'm going to go to Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor. It's very similar, but where the set driven key basically goes, if this value equals this, these values equal something else. This basically goes, this equals that. So 1 equals 1. It's just one to the other. And because this is just on off and the IK blend is on off, I can essentially have the FKIK blend here equal, let's load the right side here, the IK blend here, which should be right there. Boop. There we go. I've connected them. You can see it's turned yellow there, which means that now I can just use this to turn the IK back on. Boop. Turn it off. Right there. So that would be one way to create a quick FKIK switch right there. So if you needed it. So with that, let's actually hide this now. Don't need to see that right now. Actually, let's add it to display layer just in case we need it later. And is this Blender? No, this is Maya. I do want to learn Blender though at some point. I do like Blender. I just haven't had a chance to use it much. Most of the stuff I do is in Maya. So at this point, we need to create controls for our arms. So I need a shoulder, elbow, wrist control. Well, we kind of did that in the quick demo before. Create NURBS primitives circle. That's really what most control curves on a rig are. It's just this quick little circle here. Now I want to move these to line up with the joints. So let's actually make 3 of them right here. Right there. And I want to match it to this joint. The way I'm going to do this is just select the curve, then the joint, go to modify, and then match transformations, and I'm going to match the translations. Boop, right there. And then just rotate this into place and actually make sure I don't select the joint there. Rotate that. Maybe shrink it down just a little bit here. Get it to the right size. So we'll say around there. Do the next one. So this one to the joint. I can repeat the last command that I did by hitting G as in gorilla. And that'll just repeat that last command. So I don't have to reposition or go through all the menus again. Let's set that. Whoop. Maybe right around there. Same thing here. And shrink it down to size. Okay. So with that, we've got our controls in place. Now, we want to make sure that these are zeroed out. You can see they've got different scale values. They've got different translate values, all of that. This will make it so that if we're posing our rig and we want to reset the arm, if I zero this out, suddenly they're all down here. That's going to break our rig. We want these to be the default positions for this rig. Let's actually set this to 90 degrees as well. Okay. So let's take this here, and then I'm going to go to modify, freeze transformations. Freezing your transformations basically takes your current values and resets them. You'll see here, translates and rotates are now 0, scales are 1 on all of these. If I move this and rotate this and then zero it out, boop, that's its new starting position there. The next thing I'm going to do, just because it's a good habit to get into with this kind of stuff, is I'm going to delete the history on these. It's always good to delete your history and freeze your transformations before you do any kind of rigging on things, because any kind of history can start breaking elements. Now, I want to be very careful here. I don't want to delete all by history. Delete all by type history. That's going to break your rig. Just select the controls that you just made. They're not connected to anything yet. Edit, delete by type, history. Now it's just kind of reset these. Yeah, they are now like new. This is what Maya thinks, like they have always existed in this way. They have never been anything else. So with that, we need to control these joints. Now, before we do anything else, another thing we need to do is name things. Never just leave these default names. It just messes things up and makes it hard to find things. So this is going to be shoulder control. The next one is going to be elbow control. Get into the habit of naming things. Usually the moment you create something, name it. Or as soon as you get into position, or it's like, okay, this is what it is, name it. You do not want to get into the habit of not naming things, because the moment that happens, you're going to lose track of things. And maybe you're not going to lose track of it now, but if you have to leave your shot for a week or a month, which happens in the industry, you come back, locator 5, locator 10, what was I using that for again? I don't know. It's going to be a mess. And it's even worse when someone else has to take a look at your shot and they just see like polycube 1, polycube 10, polycube 100. What the heck is that? It's very frustrating when you have to work with someone's scene and the naming convention is non-existent. Name things. Name your layers, name your objects, name everything when you create them. Because no one wants to deal with a scene that has just random names. See, name your layers. One time I got a mess of layers, showed it to my lead, and his immediate response was, "Oh God." Yeah, exactly. You that's what you don't want. And this has happened to everyone at some point. I remember having a project that I worked on when I was modeling, I can't remember what it was. It was like some sort of ship. And I didn't name a single thing on it. It was just creating tons of things, and I stopped working on it for a while, and I came back a month later And I had to spend like 2 hours naming every single thing because I couldn't remember what every item was on there. There were bolts and rivets and nuts and like body pieces and like things like that. And it's like, I have no idea. I'm trying to select each one and organize them in the outliner. It was a nightmare. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to other people. Name your things. If you get one thing out of this demo is to name your objects, I will be happy if that's the only thing you get out of this demo. So we've got our objects named, reset, and in place. At this point, we need to start connecting them. Now, the big thing is I can't just parent the joints right here. So let's just kind of give an example. I want this shoulder joint to be controlled by the shoulder control. Okay. Take the shoulder control, then the joint. We're going to go to constrain and do a parent constraint right there. Oop. There we go. Haha. Let's do the elbow now. Elbow and then wrist here. Do that constraint. Aha. Great. So let's just do a quick test before going any further. Aha. Elbow works. Great. But look at the wrist. Notice how it's not following along? I wonder why. Let's do the shoulder. Oh. Something's gone wrong. Something's gone horribly wrong. Essentially, what happened is the controls are not connected to anything. They're just sitting there on their own without any hierarchy or anything. So when I constrain my joints to them, this is like if I just locked my arm and like nailed it to a piece of wood and went, yep, all rigged. All I've done is broken my arm because that piece of wood is not going to be moving with me. It's just nailed me in place and I can't move now without breaking my arm. I don't want to do that. These controls need to be part of the rig. They need to be moving with the rig and in a hierarchy so that they affect each other. So let's undo this and get that into the rig. So here we have to start digging through the rig and see where we've got things. I'm going to find the shoulder joint. Then in the outliner, I'm just going to hit F to find it and go to it. So we've got the shoulder joint right here. That's the left arm. Let's open that up. And we have left forearm. That's the elbow. Left hand. There's the hand. Okay. Now, let's see. The left hand is constrained to something. I wonder what it is. I'm assuming it's probably this. Yeah, rig left hand. If you look at the name, see rig left hand. There it is, rig left hand. So that hand is currently constrained to this control right here. Is that a problem? Nope, not a problem at all. We'll just have to deal with that in a slightly different way. So let's go through this here. The first joint, the shoulder joint, right here, needs to control. Sorry, this shoulder control needs to control the shoulder joint right there. It also needs to be affected by the clavicle control. When I move that clavicle control, I need the joint control to move with it. So I'm going to take my shoulder control and let's put it under, where is it here? Left shoulder. I'm going to middle mouse drag this onto left shoulder. Oop. Now it is under there. So now if I move the clavicle right there, which I should just use the control for it. Aha, it's moving with. Now, when I move this joint right here, I will want this control to follow along. So I'll take my elbow control and parent it under the left arm. Right there. So now if I take that left arm, whoop, hey, it follows along. Same with the wrist. I want this wrist control to follow the elbow control. So elbow control is left hand right there. So the wrist control, I'm going to parent it under left forearm right there. So now everything should be connected and aha, moving with. It's part of the rig now. At this point, I just need these controls to move the orientation of these joints. I don't need to affect the translation because they're just rotating. That's what an FK rig is. It's just rotations. We could translate if we want, but usually that's more trouble than it's worth unless you're doing a really cartoony rig. For this, let's keep it simple. So I want this control to now move the shoulder joint, the left arm joint. I'm going to take the thing that the thing that leads, then the thing that follows, go to constrain, and I'm going to do an orient constraint. And I'm going to make sure maintain offset is turned on. Just make sure that the relationship between these two joints stays the same. And I'll just hit add. Now, if I take this control, aha! It's working. And double check that the clavicle still works. Perfect. Let's do the same for the next control. Object that leads, object that follows. I'm going to hit G to repeat the last command, which was the constraint that I did. Now, I take this control. Aha! It moves. But notice something before I go too much further. Look at the translate values on my elbow control. Notice how they've changed? Is that a bad thing? No, because we're not using the translates. The reason this changed is because they inherited the translations from the thing they were parented to, which in this case was the shoulder joint. See how it has some translations? Now this will have some translations. Is that a bad thing? Yeah, not necessarily. But if you did want to play it safe, just in case, it's good if you notice this happening, freeze those transformations again. It's just a wise thing to do. Always double check. If you start going too far and notice it too late, you're going to have to redo some work, especially if it starts causing some issues. So let's do that orient constraint again. Right here, same thing. So test it. Clavicle is working. Shoulder joint is working. Elbow joint is working. Now with the elbow, one thing I usually recommend, and we're not going to do it now, but we might do it later, is to lock and hide the extra attributes that you're not going to use. Usually the elbow only moves in one axis. So we only need the one there. Now for the wrist joint, let's get that in place. So wrist to hand here and create that constraint. And you'll notice when I try to do this, and where'd it go? There it goes. When I rotate this, you might notice something happen. See how the y-axis, let's make this a little bit bigger, is lined up with the fingertips right now. Let's do that. There we go. See how this point is right at the fingertips? If I move that down, see how the hand doesn't follow exactly? This could be a pain because it's not following the control one-to-one. If I have this control here, see how the wrist stays perfectly in line? Why is that? Well, it's because the joint here is currently being constrained to two things. It's constrained to the new wrist control we created. It's also constrained to the IK control right here. So if I was to move the IK control, you can see it's still following that. We don't want that. We want it to be so that when the arm is constrained to the FK, it's just to the FK. So what you can do here is with the wrist control here selected, just change the weight attribute on your arm. The weight of a constraint is how powerful is that constraint and is it on or off? And right now the weight of it is set to 1 for both the left hand IK control and the wrist FK control right here. So if I turn this off, now 100% of the constraint is going into this wrist control there. So there we go. And with that, I have an FK arm right there. I'm all good. So with that, if that's all you're going to do, done. We're all set to go. Don't need to do anything else. But let's say we wanted to be able to turn that IK back on and be able to animate that no problem. You'll notice that I turned on that FK IK blend and haha, the IK works and the FK does nothing again. Yay. So we've got an FK IK switch. Woo. But the wrist doesn't follow the IK control because we turned that constraint off. How do we get this to work now? I want to be able to switch between them and get them both to work. This is where we will use the set driver, or set driven, I should say, in Maya. Or we could go even further with nodes. So let's actually do it both ways, just to kind of show what you can do in Maya. So essentially what I want is when I switch this FK IK blend, I want the constraint on this wrist to switch. That's pretty much it. So to do this, I'm going to go to animation, key, set driven key, and let's go to set. So the driver is the thing that's going to control everything. In this case, it's this control right here. So I'm going to select it and hit load driver. And I want the FK IK blend to be the thing that drives this. So there's our driver control. Here's the attribute we want to be in control. Now the driven, this is the controls we want to actually be affected. And I want the constraint to be affected. Now a common issue here is that I'll select the wrist here, the joint, and go, okay, there's the weight. That's what I want to have be affected. Load driven. Where is it? I'm seeing the visibility translates all that. I don't see the weight attributes. That's because these weight attributes are not part of the joint of the wrist. They are part of the constraint. So right here, left hand orient constraint 1. That's a whole other object. It's just connected in here because those two objects are connected. Instead, I need to select it right there. Left hand orient constraint 1. Ta-da. Now if I load driven, there we go. There's our weight attributes. So essentially the way this works is when the FK IK blend here equals off, I want to set a key on, in this case, the right hand weight and wrist control weight in these current values. So I'm going to go rig left hand key. You can see it gets this dark blue key. That's a set driven key. Wrist key. There we go. Now we go back to the driver. When the driver equals on, then the next attributes here will be the opposite, like so. And we key them again. So essentially, we've set the driver as off, set the others to equal what they should be when that's off. We then turn it on, the driver. We set the other keys to what they should be, key it again. And now, when I switch this, let's see if this worked correctly. We've got an FK-IK blend. There we go. So that's basically a set-driven key. It's just when something equals this attribute, you key all the other ones at their values. When it equals something else, you key them at a different value, and you're done. So there we go. We've got an FK-IK blend. And everything should work, and this should rotate just fine. Okay, So that's one way of doing it with the set-driven key. And honestly, that's usually what I like, but I've kind of started going away from it, mostly because with certain rigs, it can kind of start getting heavy and you can start running into certain issues with set-driven key sometimes. That's a whole other discussion. So let's go over another way we connect these. Essentially, we want to connect the FK-IK blend to the constraint. So we can use the connection editor. Can use the same technique, but with a float. Yeah. So set-driven key can connect to anything and with any value. It doesn't have to be a Boolean. It could be a float, an integer, whatever. Is essentially when it equals this value, the other controls will equal another value. It's really cool. And you can get a lot of control. This is how, if you've ever noticed, there's a control on a rig where, let's say, I have a switch, like, well, here, this is a good example. Oh, it turned it all off. On this rig, we showed at the beginning how you can switch the different facial expressions, like smile, and it turns on the smile of the face. And I go to frown and it turns the frown on. That's what it's doing, is when you set the smile to frown, it's going to turn everything else off except for the frown face. If you set it to smile, it turns everything else off except for the smile face. So it's just going through, and you can set it to whatever you want, whether it's a list, an integer, anything. So another way we can connect it is, and there's another question. I prefer to do IKFK switch during several frames than on one frame. So when you're animating, honestly, it's personal preference. I usually do it over one frame. There are benefits to both. If you do it over multiple frames, it can be easier to blend certain things together. If you do it over one frame, especially through a fast motion, you don't have to worry about any moments where you're dealing with two sets of controls. So you have more finesse over your specific pose, but sometimes you can start seeing that switch if you're not careful. Both are correct. As long as you don't see the switch, that's the important thing. So let's connect this one other way. And this is going to be with a straight connection, like we did earlier. So I'm going to go to Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor, right here. And we want to connect the FK-IK blend to the orient constraint. So I'm going to reload right here. And there's our weight attributes. So the FK-IK blend is going to pump its information into there, into both of those weights there. So now when this is off or on, those get affected right here. And oops, wrong one, that one. Great. But we run into an issue here. And that is that now they're just going to be off, off, on, on. They're following exactly. We don't want that. We want one to be on, one to be off. Well, how do we fix that? So essentially, let's just double check here. While this is off, we want... Let's go back to our connection editor here. Connection editor. So while this is off, we want right or rig left hand to be off and wrist control to be on. So wrist control needs to be the opposite of what we're getting. If I do this, we don't get the opposite. It just connects straight in. How do we fix that? It's doing a straight connection. This is where the node editor in Maya comes in. So everything in Maya is nodes. The constraint is a node. The connection is just a connection from one node to the next, the wrist. So if I select my constraint here, and I go to Windows, Node Editor, and let's graph this out. So I'm going to hit this little arrow button. This is going to graph the in connections and the out connections right there. Now it can look very messy at first. So let's find our constraint, orient constraint. Left hand, there's our orient constraint. So let's kind of clean this up a little bit. So our orient constraint is having information pumped into the right, keep saying right, rig left hand and wrist control, which is, let's see, right there, rig left hand and wrist control. Where are those coming from? Our extra controls. That's this thing right here, extra controls. So if we open this up, we have the FK-IK blend putting its information into rig left hand and wrist control weight right there. But we want wrist control weight to be the opposite. We want it to be off instead. So how can we do that? Well, we can do it in a few different ways. What I can do here is add a reverse node. A reverse node basically takes the input and reverses it. So if I put this in here, so let's put this into input X right there. So input X is taking 0. And if I take the output X and put that into wrist control, now it's reversed. You see how it's set to 1. It's taking that 0 or 1 value, that binary value, the Boolean, and going 0 becomes 1, goes out. If this is 1, it'll go in there, reverse it, becomes 0. So I've just created this straight connection without any set-driven keys, and I've done the same thing. So now, if we look at that constraint, 0, 1, if I turn this on, 1, 0. Same thing. Now, is there a reason why you should pick one or the other? Personal preference, really. Certain times you'll want a blend key, or sorry, not blend key, set-driven key. Other times you're going to want a connection. I personally like connections just because it's kind of very specific and you have more control on varying things up specifically in certain cases, but that's just me. If you don't like looking at these graphs, you don't ever have to take a look at them. You can use it with a set-driven key. But either way, what we're doing is just connecting this extra controls right here, that FK-IK blend. So now we can create our own system right through here. Let's make sure we turn off IK handles. Don't need to see those anymore. Turn off the skeleton joint right there. And there we go. We've got the character in place. Now you'll notice that the controls here, when I turn off the skeleton's visibility, they do disappear. That's because of the way we set this up. We set this up in a very simple way. A more complex way would have been to keep the controls separate from the rig itself. That's a whole other thing, which honestly, it's not that much more complex, but there's extra layers that we have to go to. Since we can't use this skeleton layer anymore, all you need to do is go to show, turn off joints. There you go. Same thing, pretty much. And this way is just a little simpler. And we've got our FK control all set to go. Then you would just have to do the same thing on the other arm. So, voila, that's pretty much it. And we do still have that nice FK-IK switch. So it's not like we're losing capabilities with the rig. So I hope that helps. I hope that made sense. If you do have any other questions on that, definitely let me know. This is something that as animators, we don't have to do that often. Honestly, pretty much never. But it is one of those things that it's fun to play around with. Rigging is its own little fun experiment. So if you ever get a chance, I do recommend playing around with it a little bit, learning more about it. It can help you at least diagnose issues when you run into something on a rig, and just kind of give you a different view. And yes, A to the J, I love all you riggers who are watching. Respect. Yes, like toast to all the riggers. We can't do what we do without you. And we deeply appreciate all the hard work that you put into making it so that we can animate something and have a good time with it. It is mind-boggling the amount of work that goes into rigging. And like, this was a simple rig, and look at all the steps we did. And a lot of it, if a professional rigger saw me doing this, they're probably shaking their head and going, oh, there's so many better ways of doing that. Like, rigging is such a deep topic. I would love to learn it someday, but I don't have the time. And those who do take that time, oh, I applaud you. Like, full respect. You guys deserve it. And an animator who can rig, or a rigger who can animate, that's like the cream of the crop in a lot of studios. Especially a rigger who can animate, because then they can make the rigs that the animators love to use. That's like a power combo. Studios, they fight for that combo if they can find it. Let's see, is adding an orient space to the FK arm difficult? Orient space. Oh, you mean like follow a line? Yeah, it's difficult because you essentially have to create another. It's not that difficult. You have to add another constraint and a group that will basically follow the clavicle. So you have to make it so that the shoulder joint, the shoulder here, does not get affected by this rotation here, or does get affected by it. You can see here it doesn't follow, or actually this is still in IK. Let me switch it to FK. So if I move this right now, it's following along perfectly. I need to set this so that this does not follow the clavicle. And I would do that. There's a few different ways I could do it. I could group it. Let's see. Let me think here. Essentially what I would need is it needs to follow something else. Instead of following the clavicle here, let's do this super simply. I'm going to create a locator just as a base. You could use anything really, an empty group, whatever. And let's actually, because we don't want to see it, let's not create a locator. A cool little trick is if you want to just create an empty object that is nothing, just make sure nothing is selected and hit Control G. That'll go to group. But because nothing's selected, you're going to create what's called a null object. It's just an empty group. That's really what it is. So I'm going to call this shoulder. Let's call it align. And I'm just going to place this into the rig, but not somewhere that's going to follow anything specific. So if I was doing this properly, I'd put this like hidden somewhere that makes sense. I'm just going to put it into the skeleton group right here. And let's zero out the arm, because we don't want to do this while the arm is all wonky here. And this shoulder right now is following the orientation of the shoulder there, of the clavicle. So what I need is this shoulder to follow the orientation of something else. In this case, the null object. So to do this, I'm going to take that shoulder. I can't constrain it directly right now, because if I do, I won't be able to rotate it. I want to be able to rotate it. So I'm going to take that shoulder control and group it. And we'll call it shoulder. Oops. Oh no, I hate it when I do that. When you start typing something and you're not in like a text box, you're just typing it somewhere randomly. I hate that. Shoulder, and then underscore GRP for group. Okay. So now let's double check that nothing's broken. Okay, all working. Clavicle, all working. Now, this shoulder group is going to follow the orientation of the null object. So the shoulder align right here. So to do this, I'm going to take my shoulder line. This is going to be the thing that leads. This is going to be the thing that determines the orientation. And then I'm going to take my shoulder group and do a constrain orient right here. So now that shoulder group should follow the orientation of the shoulder align, which is not going to change. Which means that when I move the clavicle now, you can see that it's not moving the shoulder. The shoulder is still pointing forward. It still works, it's just not following the clavicle. Now, what this means is if I want to turn that on and off, I just take that shoulder group right here, turn off that weight, and now it follows along again. And to create a good connection to this, this is where I would add that align control. So on the shoulder control here, you can do this on different ways. You could add it to your extra controls there. Most rigs, they have it on the actual shoulder control. So I'm going to add a new attribute. So modify, add attribute. Let's call this follow align. It's going to be a Boolean. Let's add that. So follow the line off usually means that when you move the clavicle, it's going to follow the arm. So I want the follow line off. And we're just going to use the connection editor once again. Connection editor. Follow line is going to control the constraint on the shoulder align. Or sorry, not shoulder align, shoulder group. That's where our constraint is. So this constraint right here. The weight of that constraint. So let's double check that this works. So right now, shoulder align is off, which means it's following the arm. If I turn this on, now it's pointing forward. So there we go. So essentially you're just giving it something else to follow. In this case, just an empty group that's not moving. But that's fine. It's just following that thing. So there we go. Now we have the shoulder follow line on off. Yeah. Let's see. I did a tiny bit of rigging for the pizza boxes, and rigging seems super intriguing. It is. I really appreciate rigging, and the more you learn about it, and the more you dig into like little things like this, how that follow line, it seems like such a complex thing. Like how do you turn off the orientation and whatnot? But you learn these little tiny tricks, and it's not that complex, and it just kind of gives you a better understanding of how Maya works and how we as animators can use these little tricks to make certain things much easier for ourselves. It's really cool.